Will the copyright crackdown really see Aussie pirates change their ways?
And is Microsoft Surface 3 really an iPad killer? Welcome to Vertical Hold, the tech show where we channel surf through the headlines in search of the big picture. I'm Alex Kidman, and I'm joined by a man who claims he's the true heir to the Iron Throne, Adam Turner. Adam, what's happening in tech news?
New US streaming video service HBO Now is up and running just in time for the return of Game of Thrones. Australians are locked out of the $15 per month service, which also has a fair amount of the HBO back catalogue, but it's not too hard for Aussies to bluff their way in and have a look around.
Samsung's announced the pricing for its Galaxy S6 and Galaxy S6 Edge smartphones. Those are its premium devices, or at least they will be right up until it announces the presumably Note 5, probably sometime around November this year. If you want an S6 or an S6 Edge though, you'd better be saving your shekels. The base price of the S6 comes in at $999, and the top end price of the S6 Edge is a wallet-busting $1,449. It's probably just coincidental that those are exactly the same prices you pay for an iPhone, right?
Australia's new anti-piracy code is expected to be enforced by September 1, paving the way for movie houses to chase illegal downloaders through the courts after 3 warnings. Funding for the scheme is yet to be finalised, but they've scrapped plans to charge $25 if you want to contest one of your warnings.
Telstra's making some serious moves in the broadband space, both for fixed line and mobile customers. For fixed line customers, it's promising that it's going to upgrade the quota allocated to its customers, but not specifically by how much or when customers will get it. The reason for the latter problem is apparently just due to the number of customers they've got to deal with. Some customers have reported getting double their quota for no extra money, which is quite nice, especially when you consider that Telstra is usually seen as the pricey option. Meanwhile, in the mobile broadband space, from May the 12th, it'll offer an option to pay $10 for every extra gigabyte of data, or part thereof, that you use. This matches a deal that Optus and Vodafone have had for some time. So Adam, the Game of Thrones hype is at a fever pitch, but should we be getting quite as excited about HBO Now?
It really depends what you're looking for. HBO Now is HBO's new streaming service in the US. And the reason why this is exciting is because it's the first time there's been a HBO streaming service that hasn't required you to have a home subscription. So it's a little bit like Foxtel Play here in Australia. You can sign up by just saying, "Hi, I'm Joe Bloggs and I live in a Starbucks in Delaware." You couldn't do that before.
Because we should kind of point out that they haven't launched HBO Now here.
In Australia. No. But if you can create yourself a US iTunes account, come up with a fake US address and use a VPN or some kind of DNS workaround, it's not that hard to find your way. And if you've
It's astonishing how many
Netflix
Australians
before,
seem to have a 90210 postcode. It's just amazing, really.
No, don't do that, because you're paying California sales tax. Seriously, you've got to look for a state with no sales. I thought I was really clever because I lived at 1060 West Addison, which Blues Brothers fans will know why that's funny, till I realised I was paying Illinois sales tax. So yeah, Delaware. Delaware is the place to go. Anyway, for these theoretical people who theoretically sneak into HBO Now, it's good. It's very sleek. It's got a huge HBO back catalogue. There's like 50 series in there. Pretty much everything I reckon that HBO's ever made. But it's costing you $15 US a month. Once you allow for your geo-dodging fees, your exchange rates, whatever, you're paying more than 20, right? If the only reason you're paying for Game of Thrones, then you're saving only about less than $10 compared to Foxtel Play in Australia, because they dropped their prices during Game of Thrones. If you really want that HBO back catalogue and it's got stuff that you can't get in Foxtel, it's a no-brainer. But Foxtel Play's got a much broader range of things. If you're paying for that extra premium content channel to get Game of Thrones, you're getting a whole lot of stuff that you won't find in HBO Now. So if you can sneak into HBO Now, there's a free month, you can have a look around.
I wonder how many
people,
people,
for most
though,
people, it's not
would be looking at Foxtel Play and just going, "Oh, it's Foxtel. I don't like the Murdoch Empire," or I have this,
that's the
this point
thing.
of
For a lot of people,
thing.
for a lot of people, it's a principle thing. The number of comments I get on the blog posts that I write about people who say, "I will never ever give my money to Murdoch." I understand for some reason it's a point of principle, but HBO aren't saints either. The reason why we get screwed on Game of Thrones in Australia is because HBO lets Foxtel do it to us. They agreed to this exclusive deal, so don't think that Foxtel are the bad guys.
HBO is
are
not
the
whiter
good
than
guys.
white in this whole
No.
instance either. And I mean, it's notable that Game of Thrones particularly is not available, and from what they've told me, will not be available on Foxtel's budget streaming service Presto. It's not going to be there.
No, absolutely.
And that, so I have been told, is at HBO's insistence.
So, Alex, Microsoft Surface 3, third time's a charm?
Well, maybe it's not. In some ways, it's an interesting little product because it's not quite the third time, depending on what you think the Surface 3 is.
Yeah.
Now, to give you the basic rundown, it's really kind of the budget version of the Surface Pro. So it is a little bit cheaper than even the cheapest Surface Pro tablet, but unlike previous Surface without the Pro bit tablets, this isn't running on an ARM system, which means, thankfully, it isn't running Windows RT. It's dead! I've been waiting for that for such a long time.
It's a Surface device that's running a full version of Windows.
Yes, it's running Windows 8.1, and Microsoft have said it will be upgradable to Windows 10 when that ships later this year.
Okay, I have the look of surprise on my face. Like, this is really, I obviously didn't read closely enough. I just assumed that, and I assume most people would assume, Surface, Windows RT, don't bother. This is a huge deal.
This is
huge deal.
This is a big-ish deal. I mean, what Microsoft's trying to do is it's trying to move towards this market where it says, well, everything is Windows 10, all our phones are Windows 10, all of the apps are Windows 10. Now, that's not actually, strictly speaking, true. They're playing semantic games around this one because they've actually said, look...
Really? Microsoft? No.
Well, software company playing games, it's funny. No, what they're going to do is there will still be two classes of applications because the phones themselves are still running on ARM cores. There's still programming issues to get around. So you will have what are called Windows Universal apps, and those are the ones that will run on phones and should run on Windows desktops. And then you will have Windows 10 desktop apps. And the desktop apps are your classic Windows apps. They're the x86 core stuff. And the thing with the Surface 3 is that whereas previous Surface tablets were running on various bits of ARM hardware, this is running on an Intel Atom processor instead.
Oh, on an Atom, but not a Core.
Correct.
The Surface Pros have always been Core i3, i5s, whatever, with more grunt.
This is an Intel Atom X series. So you get the usual thing with Atom where they're a bit more... they're a bit more sipping on battery life. They claim this thing will get up to 10 hours of battery life, where the Pro is only said to get up to 9 hours. Up to is always one of those rubbery figures, but still, they're saying this one will have slightly more battery life, essentially. But the trade-off is that this is not going to be a particularly strong processing machine if you're after that kind of Windowsy goodness of it. If you're after a tablet, though, then maybe it will be, and that's, I think, where it gets really interesting.
If it's an Atom, basically don't get excited about doing more than one thing at a time.
Yeah, and don't think of it as a games machine or a video rendering machine or anything like that. But where it gets interesting is the Surface Pro is a great bit of hardware. It's beautifully designed. It's really nice to use. I mean, we both said very nice things about it in our end-of-year wrap last year. And the Surface 3 follows that kind of trend. It's the same kind of design idea. You don't get quite as slick a kickstand. You don't get quite the same number of ports. Although this thing does charge off micro USB, which means, well, you know, you wouldn't want to be using it too much. You could charge it off your phone charger. You could charge it off anything that does micro USB, which is essentially these days everyone but Apple. But it's got that nice design in the same kind of price points, and I'm sure this isn't coincidental, as Apple's iPad. And I'm sure Microsoft will be pitching this pretty heavily at that market because they're still in that space where they don't want to say, well, buy our Surface rather than someone else's Windows laptop, because they don't want to tick off all those OEM partners that they've got. Apple, on the other hand, well, they might play nicely with them around Office for Mac and, you know, Office for iPad, that kind of stuff. But still, they're a fierce hardware competitor. They're perfectly happy to say, hey, here's an iPad. And look, I would not be surprised if they do the reverse of the old Mac PC thing, because they've certainly done it with the Surface Pro, and say, here's an iPad, here's a Surface 3. Just imagine the big invisible props I'm holding right now. You can do so much on the iPad, you can do so much more on the Surface 3. Now, whether that's true or not, that remains to be seen. But it's certainly an interesting pitch.
So how much of a price difference is it between an Atom Surface and an Intel Surface Pro? Oh, sorry, and a Core Surface Pro?
Standalone between the low-end i3, and I'm speaking off the top of my head, so I'm doing a little bit of mental maths as I do this, you're talking around $300?
Well, I was going to say, because if you're going to say $100, I'd say screw it, just pay it.
Well, this is
$300
this is
is
the
a bit,
thing,
yeah.
though. This is $300, but Microsoft's done something that it's always done this, and I've always thought it was a bit of a dumb move. The type cover is not included as standard with the Surface 3. It's not standard with the Pro either.
Why would you want one of these things
But
without
yeah,
it, though?
who's buying this thing without the
Yeah.
type cover? The type
Yeah.
cover is a really big, good reason to buy it, and I don't get why they don't bundle it. So you've got
Is
to
it
bump up.
$150 or something?
Yeah,
for one
yeah.
of them?
You've got to bump up the price by that much. Also, the top end, there's two variants. There's the $699, and again, I'm speaking off the top of my head, but I think it's about $879 for the 128 gig.
Yeah.
But the problem with that one is that then you're within $150 of the Core i3 Pro 3, and that's where it gets crunchy. That's where my head starts to say, Now, admittedly, I need some testing time. I need to be able to see how much of a difference the Atom makes, but certainly everything else that's been published suggests, it's typical Atom performance. It's not bad performance, but it's noticeably that bit slower.
I guess it really depends
on
on what you're looking for.
So, Adam, it's been a really big couple of weeks in terms of piracy down under.
Oh, yeah.
What's been happening?
Well, the two big things are that we've seen the final draft of the piracy code that's going to be put into place to force all the ISPs to play nicely. But the big thing is this week that the backers of the Dallas Buyers Club had a big win in the courts against IINet, and they're actually getting in before this new 3 strikes code. So these people, these 5,000 people who are caught up in this, won't get the benefit there.
Well, they may not. I mean, it's a really interesting one, and I suppose we should say. Well, I mean, we discussed the draft version of the piracy code when it came out, and they have made a few small changes to it in what appears to be the final version. Yeah.
Yeah, one of the things they've done is they've got rid of the $25 fee that they wanted if you wanted to contest a warning. I really didn't have a problem with that because you got your $25 back if you won. So basically, it was just their way of saying, don't be a time waster, don't be a jerk. If you want to cause trouble for no reason, it's going to cost you $25. And apparently in the fine print, they've still reserved the right to add a fee later if they find that people are complaining just to create paperwork. One of the other changes is they're adding an extra consumer representative to the panel that's going to oversee this thing, which is good because the whole sort of process has really felt a bit, content owner heavy.
Now, the counterpoint to a whole 3 strikes policy, though, is what's happening, or what appears to be happening, around the court victory won by the Dallas Buyers Club LLC.
Yeah, now this one's been going on for a while, and what it basically comes down to is the copyright owners for this movie say, we've got a list of about 5,000 IP addresses from Australia of people who we reckon downloaded our movie illegally. We want you to tell us who these people are so we can send them nasty letters. And IINet said basically, you make your barbecue, piss off. We're not going to do it for you. So they've dragged them through the courts. They've lost that, which is a bit of a surprise because IINet's done pretty well for themselves in the courts in the past. But they've lost this one. They've got 30 days to appeal, but it looks like they are going to have to hand over the contact details of those customers. One win, though, is that the judge said that he wants to oversee the wording of those letters to make sure they're not doing this dodgy thing called speculative invoicing, where they basically say, we're tempted to drag you through the courts, but if you give us $10,000 or $5,000, a lot of money, we'll make it all go away. And that's kind of got a bit of an extortion feel to it.
Yeah,
so
IINet raised
sure that
this
doesn't
themselves,
happen in this
that they were trying to defend customers on that basis.
That's one of the reasons why they didn't want to hand
Dallas
it over,
Buyers Club and Voltage Pictures, who kind of they're the parent company. It's a typical Hollywood accounting thing where there's 50,000.
Oh, it's very
firms. And the big thing about this in real terms is not that Dallas Buyers Club was a movie that millions of Australians were pirating because it was massively desirable. It's that it becomes this kind of landmark in law. It becomes this precedent that others may rush in on. But they've come out swinging somewhat. They've come out saying, well, look, we may not pursue for the same kind of sums because, at least in the States, when we did pursue those sums, that was for people who were both torrenting their own copy of this but then leaving the torrent running and therefore, promoting and distributing the movie en masse, perhaps hundreds of times. At the same time, they've also said, and this is very much just a kind of slick PR move, that there's certain people that they would not pursue. If you have some kind of physical or mental disability, they might not pursue you. Which, you know, it sounds good.
Anything that would look bad in the papers.
Exactly,
basically.
it's that kind of move.
We won't be dragging little old ladies
I'm
out
not
of their home
sure
by
that
the
they're
hair.
gonna. I'm not sure that they're actually gonna look all that good in the papers, and I'm not sure that that's entirely what all of this is about. But where it sits in that interesting space is, of course, that one of the things IINet tried to say was, well, look, we've got this code of conduct coming in because they're part of the Communications Alliance that has drafted it and that it was being presented. We've got this code of conduct coming in, which makes this whole process of provisional discovery moot because we just send them out, you know, if it was their first offence, we'd just send them out this education letter, wouldn't we? And the judge basically said, well, actually, no, I don't think that one's going to come in on time. But he said a lot of interesting technology things as well, because they tried to advance the argument that because with BitTorrent, of course, you're only trading tiny pieces of a file at any one time. The court documents refer to them as slivers, which I rather like, actually. It's a beautiful term. But leaving that aside, the IINet tried to argue, well, look, you can't prove from a single person grabbing a single sliver that they got the whole movie. Maybe they gave up. The judge thought that was a little bit...
but it's rather damning circumstantial evidence.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the judge basically said, no, look, I think that's a bit spurious. It's reasonable to presume that they did finish the download. But it does raise that kind of that further question of how far you have to push this evidence. Because what Dallas Buyers Club LLC wants are the names and addresses of the users associated with that IP address at that point in time when the download was taking place. Which is a very long sentence. But an IP address is not necessarily an individual.
No, that doesn't mean you've necessarily got the guilty party. It just means you've traced it back to a house.
And that's where the speculative invoicing gets nasty, because if I get a letter from Dallas Buyers Club saying, we've detected that you've done this, and I'm sitting there thinking, well, I'm sure I didn't, but, oh, maybe my kids, oh, blimey.
Maybe the neighbours did it.
And it's saying, you know, $2,000, $1,000, whatever, because they still do have to run all these letters past the judge. The judge has to say, yes, I think that's fair and reasonable. But he has, to be fair, he has said in his judgment as it stands that he does think that some kind of punitive sum is applicable. So the fact that, for example, you can watch Dallas Buyers Club on Netflix in standard def for $9 a month along with everything else they've got. So, you know, it's out there legally quite cheap. But that defence is not going to stand up, as the court has ruled at this point in time. Yeah.
One of the worrying things is that we've seen what we think is going to be the final draft of this piracy code, and there's nothing in there that stops them using speculative invoicing in the future. There was a push to say, if you want to use this code and the 3 strikes rules and get the ISPs to play ball in the courts, then you can't use speculative invoicing. And that didn't get up. So there is a worry that even if the judge keeps the Dallas Buyers Club letters under control, in the future others might be able to get away with that. So it's something we're really going to have to keep an eye on.
Now, I mean, any discussion about piracy always gets bogged down in a lot of the same arguments about theft and whether or not copyright provisions are fair and whether or not companies are making enough out of these kinds of things and these kinds of arguments. But in a strictly legal sense, of course, they're somewhat within their rights. If this code gets up, and I'm playing slight devil's advocate here, but I think there is some benefit to it. If this code gets up, we're not talking about someone who has done a, you know, who has downloaded a single song or even a single movie. There are 3 identified instances here, at the very least. I
don't think you can say you've been hard done by if you got 2 warnings and kept doing it. I think 3 strikes... While it's a scary thought, it's not as scary as what's happening to the Dallas Buyers Club people, which is 1 strike and you're out. So I don't think it's too unreasonable.
Yeah,
I also think it gives pirates a chance to hone their cloaking techniques, because all this legislation, all this plan's going to do is just drive people to, proxy servers and VPNs. It's just going to drive the problem underground, and the government will be able to say, well, look, no one got caught. We must have fixed the problem.
Well, that just about wraps it up for this episode of Vertical Hold. If you've got any comments you'd like to add, feel free to hit us up on Twitter, via the YouTube comments, via our Facebook page, or just shout really loud. We still might hear you.
And remember, if you like what you see, punch that subscribe button.